Thanks, David. Ari Fleischer is the former press secretary for President Bush. He's now the spokesman for a group called Freedom's Watch, which has just unveiled a 20-state, $15 million ad campaign in support of the war. Ari, 20 states, $15 million. That's more than a handful of states. That's a lot of money. How did you pick the states, and what's your objective?
Well, Mike, we picked the states and places where it's important for Democrats and Republicans who still may vote to support this war. And we want to get the message to their constituents that surrender is not an option, that it would be such a catastrophe for our country if we were to pull out of Iraq and Iraq turned into a bloodbath where terrorists were able to gather and attack us even more after we were gone. That's the fear, and that's why we picked the states and the places that we have. It's a $15 million ad buy. As you said, it's rather substantial.
Like what kind of, give me a few of the states.
Well, it's more than 20 states, and it's in those places, as I indicated, where there's still chances of members of Congress voting to keep the troops there, voting to fully fund the troops and not abandon the mission. We're not
Republican
going to run
and
ads.
Democrats, right?
Absolutely right, both Republican and Democrat. We won't do it in places where people have already concluded that the war cannot be won and there's no chance of getting their vote.
The ads are very powerful. I looked at a couple of them this afternoon. I'd like to take a look with you and with people watching right now at one of them. Here's one of the new ads by Freedom's Watch.
Congress was right to vote to fight terrorism in Iraq and Afghanistan. I re-enlisted after 9/11 because I don't want my sons to see what I saw. I want them to be free and safe. I know what I lost. I also know that if we pull out now, everything I've given and sacrificed will mean nothing. They attacked us, and they will again. They won't stop in Iraq. We are winning on the ground and making real progress. It's no time to quit. It's no time for politics.
What's that soldier's name, Ari?
Mike, I don't have his name in front of me. There are 4 people, soldiers, and then parents who have lost their children in battle as well, who have decided they wanted to put their message forward.
God bless him and God bless his service. We need more noble Americans like that. But I'd like to ask you, how many Iraqis do you figure were on that plane that you showed the shot of flying into the World Trade Center?
Mike, it's not about the 2002 decision to go into Iraq. It's about terrorism that exists in Iraq today. It's about al-Qaeda shooting at our troops today, and whether or not Congress is going to abandon this mission and leave Iraq to these terrorists. The 2002 debate is an old, stale debate about why we went into Iraq with Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction. But you can relive that all you want. Our troops aren't reliving that. They're living the fight today.
Ari, the ad is so powerful. The visual aspect of the ad is so powerful with that wonderful, noble young man. And the sight of that plane flying into the World Trade Center filled with Saudi terrorists, not Iraqis, could lead several Americans, I would expect, to think that, oh, Iraq was in on 9/11. Don't you think so?
Mike, you're stuck in the 2001-2002 timetable and debate. It is so far beyond that debate. That's like saying we never should have gone into Germany because, after all, it was just the Japanese who attacked at Pearl Harbor. The threat in Iraq today is a threat that comes from al-Qaeda, it comes from separatists, it comes from Sunni and Shia. And the problem is, if we cut now and we surrender now, that area will explode. And of course we'll be in greater risk, a greater danger from terrorists will gather there. Of course we will. Not only in Afghanistan, but there as well.
Then clearly, using the phrase cutting and running, you must be in favor of a draft to repair the broken military.
Well, I noticed in your introduction to this you called us a pro-war pressure group. So, you use your words, I'll use my words. But, of course, what alternative is there other than if they abandon the troops, if they cut the funding, if they attach so many strings to the troops that they can't fight to win, that's cutting and running.
Define winning for me.
Winning means that we can provide enough of a stable military environment for the Iraqis to increasingly take on their own affairs. Winning means that when the military says the time is right, we start to withdraw our troops.
So that's a pretty limitless timetable there that you've just defined. How are we going to repair the United States Army and the United States Marine Corps, which are clearly at the breaking point because of Iraq?
Mike, I don't remember anybody, I wasn't alive, but during World War II saying we can't fight unlimited amounts of time. there's no limit. I don't remember in the Cold War people saying let's quit because who knows how long this will go.
Do you remember
every time our nation's been tested?
Ari,
thanks to the people in our military, we've always prevailed. Let's hope that this doesn't become a time when they quit and withdraw.
Ari, do you remember reading about Franklin Delano Roosevelt asking the country to make sacrifices for World War II? Do you remember that?
And I think everybody in this country is making a sacrifice. We all do every time a soldier loses his or her life.
What's President Bush, your former employer, asked us to do, other than go shopping?
No, Mike, you're missing the point about this military is all of our military, both the people who oppose the war and the people who are for winning this war. And every time a life is lost, we all lose. We all have made a sacrifice, some more than others. And what you're hearing in these ads are the messages of the people who have lost their children but still want to win this war. And that's why this is so important.
Ari Fleischer, thanks very much for your time tonight. Paul Rieckhoff is the Executive Director of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Paul, what did you think of the President's attempt at a history lesson today down at the VFW convention?
Well, Mike, I guess desperate times call for desperate measures. It seems like they're pulling out all the stops, and since Bush has repeatedly refused the analogy between Iraq and Vietnam, I was pretty surprised. He hasn't served on the ground in Vietnam. He doesn't really have a great sense of history, and I think it's really a reach. After we pulled out of Vietnam, communism didn't take over the world, and the Viet Cong didn't come home and attack us on U.S. soil. And I don't think that Al-Qaeda is necessarily going to hit us back here because we pull out of Iraq. If they do, it might be because of Iraq. And I think it's a really convoluted argument and a sign of a real desperate attempt on the administration to try to win over the American people.
Did you get a chance to either listen to the President or perhaps read the text of his remarks today?
I did, and the thing that really upset me, to be honest with you, Mike, is the fact that he spoke to the largest gathering of veterans in America and didn't talk about veterans issues. He didn't address the two pressing issues facing the veterans of this country. The fact that the Secretary of VA, Jim Nicholson, has resigned, and we don't know who the replacement's going to be, and Walter Reed. He didn't mention Walter Reed, he didn't talk about how he's going to fix it, and he didn't mention the Dole-Shalala Commission, which laid out 6 very clear steps that can be implemented to fix the problems of Walter Reed. The ball is in his court, and we're waiting for him to implement the Dole-Shalala recommendations, and he didn't even mention it.
Well, he was also, I was struck by the fact that he really didn't get into an explanation, a defense of the surge in Iraq and how that's going and what's going on there. Not really. What did you think about that?
You know, if I was him, I wouldn't put my eggs in that basket either, necessarily. I think the surge has shown some incremental security improvements in places like Anbar, but it's not a comprehensive solution. It's not the silver bullet that's going to fix everything in Iraq and give every kid a puppy. You know, it's another piece of middling around the edges. It may show incremental improvements, but it's not going to solve the political problems that are really at the core of what's happening inside Iraq. And I think, you know, we're all going to wait for General Petraeus to deliver this magnificent report that's going to be in part crafted by the White House. And we're still going to have a discussion. It's not going to be the end-all, be-all, and we're still going to have a number of troops in harm's way without a clear strategy and without a clear definition of victory.
General Petraeus is a pretty legitimate guy. I mean, you're not saying that the White House is going to write something for him to say, are you?
I think his report's definitely going to go by the White House. It seems like they're rolling him out here to be their fall guy. It reminds me of when they rolled Colin Powell out to the UN to make the case for weapons of mass destruction. I mean, it's really a desperate measure, I think. You know, these guys are great military analysts. Petraeus is respected within the military community. I think if you read between the lines, you'll see from him that this is not going to be easy. It's not going to be over quickly, and the surge may show some incremental improvements, but it's not going to be the save-all for all things that are a problem in Iraq right now.
Paul, I don't know whether you have a monitor in the studio where you are, but did you get a chance to see the ad that we just showed when Ari Fleischer was on?
Yeah, and it really bothered me. What bothered me the most is that Ari Fleischer didn't even know the guy's name. He's willing to run a multi-million-dollar campaign utilizing the personal story of a soldier, and he couldn't tell you on national TV what that soldier's name is. It's a problematic trend. People on both sides of the aisle, but especially the President and this administration, have continued to use troops as a political prop, as a backdrop for political rhetoric. It's why the President gave such an impassioned speech today in front of the VFW. It's why this ad carries so much weight at a visceral level. And it really bothers me because our troops are not political props and they're not chew toys.
Paul Rieckhoff, thanks very much for joining us. Coming up, who's to blame when an illegal immigrant commits a crime? You're watching Hardball only on MSNBC.